The deep space monitoring station of the Zephyrian Collective hummed with quiet efficiency. Rows of alien technicians sat before glowing screens, their scaled hands dancing across control panels as they watched the endless void for signs of new life. For 300 years, the Collective had expanded across the galaxy, finding new species to study, catalog, and ultimately control. Senior Monitor Vextal adjusted his headset as a weak signal crackled through the static. His large, compound eyes focused on the readout. The transmission was coming from the outer rim, far from any known civilization. He leaned forward, his interest growing. Admiral Kethvar to the monitoring bay. He spoke into his communicator. "We have something." Minutes later, Admiral Kethvar swept into the room. The Collective's military leader was an imposing figure, even by their standards. His dark blue scales gleamed under the artificial light, and his 4 arms moved with practiced precision as he examined the data. "What do we have, Monitor?" "A distress signal, sir. Weak and breaking up, but definitely artificial. The source appears to be a small vessel, possibly a research ship." Vextal's fingers worked quickly, cleaning up the audio. "Listen to this." The speakers crackled to life. Through the static, they could hear voices speaking in an unknown language. The words were harsh and quick, unlike the flowing tones of most civilized species they had encountered. "Can you make out what they're saying?" Kethavar asked. "Our translation computers are working on it, sir. So far, we've identified several repeated words. Earth seems to be a place name, possibly their home world, and they keep saying something that translates roughly to children or young ones." Kethvar's eyes brightened with interest. The Collective's greatest scientific achievements came from studying different species, especially in their younger stages of development. Young specimens adapted better to their research programs and provided more useful data. "How far away is this signal coming from?" "Approximately 6 standard hours at maximum speed, sir. The vessel appears to be drifting, possibly damaged." "Ship. Size and capabilities?" Vextal checked his screens again. "Small, sir. Maybe 60 meters long. Basic metal construction, primitive energy signature. Their technology seems to be at least 200 years behind ours." Admiral Kethvar smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. This was exactly what the Collective needed. A new species, apparently helpless and carrying young specimens. The research division would be very pleased. "Prepare my flagship for immediate departure. Standard capture protocols. I want that ship and everything on it brought back intact." "Yes, sir." "Should we alert the research teams?" "Absolutely. Tell them we may have a new species for study, possibly with young specimens aboard." Kethvar turned to leave, then paused. "And Vextal? Good work. This could be very valuable." As the Admiral left, Vextal continued listening to the transmission. The voices seemed urgent, almost desperate. He heard the word Earth again, followed by what sounded like numbers and coordinates. The translation computer was still working, but it seemed like the beings were calling for help. Meanwhile, aboard the massive Collective dreadnought Sovereign's Will, preparations began immediately. The ship was enormous, stretching over 2 kilometers from bow to stern. Its hull bristled with energy weapons and defensive shields. It had conquered dozens of worlds and captured hundreds of different species for the Collective's research programs. Captain Zoreth, Kethvar's second, in command, supervised the loading of capture equipment. Stasis pods for live specimens, molecular restraints, and portable laboratory units were all brought aboard. The Collective had perfected the art of taking prisoners for study. "How many beings do we expect to find?" asked Dr. Sylvan, the chief. "Researcher." "Unknown," Zoreth replied. "The transmission mentioned young ones, so we should prepare for at least a few specimens. Their technology appears primitive, so they shouldn't pose any threat." Dr. Sylvan rubbed his hands together excitedly. "Excellent. New species are always fascinating, especially when we can study their development patterns from a young age." As the Sovereign's Will entered hyperspace, racing toward the distress signal, none of the Collective crew suspected what they were really heading toward. In their experience, Primitive species meant easy captures. Small ships meant weak defenses. Distress calls meant helpless victims. They had never encountered humans before. Back at the monitoring station, Vextal managed to clean up more of the transmission. The translation computer was making progress, and what it revealed made him frown in confusion. The beings weren't just calling for help. They were using military terminology, tactical language that seemed far too advanced for such a primitive species. Words like extraction, hostile contact, and defensive positions came through clearly. But most puzzling was a phrase that kept repeating, "Ghost Division." The computer couldn't make sense of it. What kind of research vessel would have something called a Ghost Division aboard? Vextal considered contacting the Admiral, but the Sovereign's will was already in hyperspace. Besides, it was probably just a translation error. Primitive species often had strange names for simple things. 6 hours later, the collective dreadnought dropped out of hyperspace near the source of the distress signal. The human vessel appeared on their screens immediately, and it looked exactly as primitive as they had expected. The ship was small and angular, built from simple metal alloys. It had basic thruster ports and what looked like primitive weapon systems. No energy shields were visible, and the power signature was remarkably weak. "Just as we thought," Captain Zoreth reported to Admiral Kethvar. "A helpless research vessel. This will be simple." Admiral Kethvar studied the human ship through the view screen. It looked damaged, with scorch marks along its hull and several systems showing as offline. Perfect for their purposes. "Open a communication channel," he ordered. The response came immediately, but it wasn't what they expected. Instead of pleading for help or trying to surrender, the human voice was calm and professional. "Unknown vessel, this is Sergeant Chen of the Terran Defense Corps. State your intentions." Admiral Kethvar was intrigued. The being sounded young, possibly one of the children they had heard about. And what was a Terran Defense Corps? It sounded military, but that made no sense for such a primitive species. "I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Collective," he replied. "We received your distress call and have come to assist you." There was a pause, then the human responded. "Negative. We did not send a distress call. Our communications have been compromised. We request you maintain distance while we complete repairs." This was unexpected. The collective had clearly intercepted a distress signal. Why would they deny sending it? "Our sensors indicate your vessel is severely damaged," Kethvar said. "We insist on providing assistance." Another pause, longer this time. When the human spoke again, there was something different in the tone, something harder. "Admiral, I'm going to say this once more. Maintain your distance. We are conducting classified operations and do not require assistance." Classified operations? From a primitive research vessel? Admiral Kethvar's patience was running out. He had not come this far to be turned away by a damaged ship with children aboard. "I'm afraid I must insist," he said. "Prepare to be boarded." The response was immediate and shocking. "If you attempt to board this vessel, you will be fired upon. This is your only warning." Admiral Kethvar looked at his crew in amazement. A tiny, damaged ship was threatening his massive dreadnought? It was almost funny. "Begin tractor beam capture," he ordered, "and prepare boarding parties. These beings clearly don't understand their situation." As the Sovereign's will moved toward, the human vessel, Admiral Kethvar, was already planning how he would display these new specimens. The young one who had spoken to him sounded particularly interesting. He had no idea that he had just made the worst mistake in the collective's 300-year history. Aboard the human ship, Sergeant Maya Chen turned away from the communication console. Her team was already in position, weapons ready, faces calm. At 22, she was the oldest person on the ship. "Well, people," she said quietly, "looks like we're going to have company. First contact gone wrong." The tractor beam from the Sovereign's will locked onto the human vessel with ease. Admiral Kethvar watched with satisfaction as the small ship was pulled steadily toward his dreadnought's main docking bay. The primitive craft had no chance of escaping. "Boarding parties ready, sir," Captain Zoreth reported. "2 full squads, armed with stun weapons and capture gear." "Excellent. Remember, we want live specimens, especially the young ones." Kethvar studied the enemy ship on his screen. "How many life signs are you reading?" 12, sir. All showing elevated stress responses, which is normal for primitive species facing superior technology." Admiral Kethvar nodded. 12 specimens would be perfect for the research division. Dr. Sylvan was already preparing the laboratory facilities. The collective boarding parties were among the finest in the galaxy. Each soldier wore powered armor that could stop most weapons and boost their strength to incredible levels. Their plasma rifles could cut through steel, and their energy shields made them nearly invincible. They had captured hundreds of ships from dozens of species. Squad leader Thekvan checked his equipment one final time as the human ship settled into the docking bay. His armor's sensors showed him everything he needed to know about the target. Vessel. Thin metal walls, basic atmosphere, primitive electrical systems. This would be over in minutes. "Remember," he told his soldiers, "these beings may look like children, but they could be adults of their species. Use stun settings only. The research teams want them alive and undamaged." The boarding tube extended from the Sovereign's will and attached to the human ship's airlock. Thekvan's sensors showed that the atmosphere inside was breathable for collective forces. Everything was proceeding normally. "Cutting through the airlock now," reported the tech specialist. "Metal is surprisingly thick for such a primitive design, but nothing our tools can't handle." The airlock door fell inward with a heavy clang. Immediately, Thekvan's squad moved forward in perfect formation, plasma rifles ready. They entered. A narrow corridor lined with metal panels and basic lighting. Everything looked exactly as primitive as they had expected, but something felt wrong. The corridor was too quiet. Most species they captured were either screaming in terror or trying to surrender by now. These beings were silent. "Life signs?" Thekvan asked. "Still reading 12 contacts, sir. They appear to be spread throughout the ship. Some are in what looks like the bridge area, others in various compartments." Thekvan motioned his squad forward. The corridor branched in 2 directions. Standard procedure was to split up and capture all specimens as quickly as possible. Team 1, take the left passage. Team 2, follow me to the bridge. Remember, we want them alive. That's when everything went wrong. The metal panels in the walls suddenly fell away, revealing hidden alcoves. From these positions, the humans opened fire with weapons that should not have existed on such a primitive ship. But these weren't energy weapons or plasma rifles. They were kinetic weapons, firing solid projectiles at incredible speeds. The collective, soldiers had never encountered anything like them. Thekvan's energy shields, designed to stop plasma bolts and energy beams, were useless against the solid bullets. The projectiles punched right through his defenses and slammed into his armor with devastating force. The human weapons made sharp, cracking sounds that echoed through the metal corridors. Bang, 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 over and over, faster than any energy weapon could fire. Thekvan watched in shock as 3 of his soldiers fell in the first few seconds. "Contact! Contact!" he shouted into his communicator. "They're using unknown weapon types. Shields are ineffective." From her position behind an overturned table, Staff Sergeant Maya Chen observed the alien soldiers with professional interest. Their armor was impressive, and their energy shields had surprised her at first. But the Terran Defense Corps had trained for encounters with unknown technologies. "Thompson Rodriguez, keep them pinned down in the main corridor," she spoke quietly into a headset. "Jackson Santos, move to flanking positions. Kim, Park, prepare for the 2nd squad." The Ghost Division was Earth's most elite Special Forces unit. Every member had been selected for their ability to think quickly and adapt to any situation. They were also the youngest Special Forces unit in human history, with an average age of barely 21. The collective had expected to capture helpless children. Instead, they had walked into a carefully prepared kill zone. Private Jackson, 19 years old and already a veteran of 4 campaigns, slid through the ship's maintenance shafts with practiced ease. The aliens had made a classic mistake by splitting their forces. Now he was behind their second team. "Ghost 2 in position," he reported. "Light them up," Chen replied. Jackson opened fire from behind, while Santos hit them from the side. The collective soldiers found themselves caught in a crossfire from multiple directions, using weapons their armor couldn't stop. Squad leader Thekvan realized his mission was failing catastrophically. Half his soldiers were down, and the other half were pinned down by enemies they couldn't even see clearly. The humans moved like shadows, appearing just long enough to fire, then disappearing again. "Sovereign's will, this is boarding party 1. He gasped into his communicator. "We need immediate support. The primitives are not primitive." Admiral Kethvar received the transmission with disbelief. "What do you mean they're not primitive? They're using basic metal weapons." "Sir, their weapons are penetrating our shields and armor. They're using tactics we've never encountered. We need heavy assault teams immediately." Before Kethvar could respond, another voice cut through the communications. It was the same young human who had spoken to him earlier. "Admiral, this is Sergeant Chen. Your soldiers attacked a vessel under the protection of the Terran Defense Corps. I'm giving you one chance to call them back before this gets worse." "Impossible," Kethvar snarled. "You're primitives with metal. Weapons!" "Sir," Chen's voice was calm, almost polite. "Your soldiers are currently experiencing what we call a learning opportunity. Your energy shields don't stop kinetic energy. Your armor is designed for plasma weapons, not solid projectiles traveling at 3,000 feet per second. And your tactics assume technological superiority can replace tactical skill." As if to prove her point, another collective soldier fell to human fire. "Your boarding parties are trapped in what we call a fatal funnel," Chen continued. "Every entrance to this ship is covered by overlapping fields of fire. Your soldiers can't advance, and they can't retreat. Would you like to discuss surrender terms?" Admiral Kethvar was speechless. In 300 years of collective expansion, no primitive species had ever spoken to them like this. No one had ever turned their own superior technology against them. "This is impossible," he repeated. "Sir, with respect, you're thinking like someone who's never fought a real war," Chen replied. "You're used to overwhelming primitive species with superior technology, but we're not primitive. We're just practical." To prove her point, Chen activated a device that squad leader Thekvan recognized too late. The humans had planted charges throughout their own ship, not to destroy it, but to reconfigure it. Bulkheads slammed shut, cutting off escape routes. Emergency lighting kicked in, giving the humans perfect night vision while leaving the collective soldiers partially blinded. Atmosphere began venting from certain sections, forcing the aliens into exactly the positions the humans wanted. In less than 5 minutes, the humans had turned their own damaged ship into a perfect trap. "How are they doing this?" Dr. Sylvan asked from the safety of the Sovereign's will. "Our sensors show their technology is centuries behind ours." "Their technology might be primitive," Admiral Kethvar admitted reluctantly. "But their tactics are not." The truth was becoming clear. The collective had never encountered a species like humans before. Most civilizations they conquered were peaceful researchers or traders. They had advanced technology but no real military experience. Humans apparently were different. "Boarding party 2, fall back to the airlock," Kethvar ordered. "We'll try a different approach." But it was too late. As the surviving collective soldiers tried to retreat, they discovered that the humans had quietly sealed the airlock behind them. They were trapped aboard the human ship with enemies who knew every corridor and hiding place. "Admiral," Sergeant Chen's voice came through the communicators again. "Your soldiers are now prisoners of war. I'm prepared to discuss their return, But first, we need to talk about what happens next. What do you mean, what happens next? Well, sir, you've just attacked a vessel belonging to the Terran Defense Corps. That's going to require a response. Admiral, Kethavar felt a chill run down his spine. Are you threatening us? No, sir. I'm informing you. You see, before your boarding parties attacked us, we managed to send out a message. A very simple message. What kind of message? Chen's voice was still calm, but now there was something else in it. Something that made Admiral Kethavar's scales prickle with unease. We told Earth that someone was attacking their children, she said quietly. Now all we have to do is wait. The swarm awakens. Admiral Kethavar stared at the view screen showing the human vessel, trying to understand what had just happened. His elite boarding parties had been defeated by a handful of beings using primitive weapons. It was impossible, yet the evidence was right in front of him. Sir, Captain Zoreth said carefully, what are your orders? Kethavar's pride was wounded, but he was not foolish. These humans had proven they were more dangerous than expected. The logical response was overwhelming force. Contact Fleet Command. Request immediate reinforcement. 3 heavy dreadnoughts minimum. Sir, for one small vessel? Captain, that small vessel just destroyed 2 of our best boarding parties using metal projectiles and tactical thinking. I want enough firepower to turn it into dust particles. Dr. Sylvan approached nervously. Admiral, what about the specimens? If we destroy the ship? The specimens just proved they're too dangerous to capture alive, Kethavar snapped. We'll study their remains. As the communications went out to Fleet Command, Admiral Kethavar settled in to wait. Fleet reinforcement would take 6 hours to arrive. He could wait that long. The human ship wasn't going anywhere. What he didn't know was that the humans had been very busy during their conversation. Aboard the Ghost Division vessel, Private Kim worked quickly at a computer terminal. At 19, she was the unit's technical specialist, trained in electronic warfare and communication systems. Package is ready, Sergeant, she reported to Maya Chen. Chen looked at the device Kim had assembled from parts of the alien equipment their prisoners had been carrying. It was a tracking beacon, modified to work with collective technology. Good work. Thompson, Santos, you know what to do. The 2 soldiers moved to where the surviving collective troops were being held. The aliens had been stripped of their weapons and armor, but they were still alive. Chen had made sure of that. We're going to let you go, Thompson told the shocked aliens. Your admiral wants his people back, and we want you off our ship. Squad leader Thekvan, wounded but alive, stared at the humans in confusion. You're releasing us? That's right. Just one condition. Santos held up Kim's modified device. You're going to carry this back to your ship. Think of it as a gift. The collective soldiers had no choice but to accept. They were escorted back to the airlock, the tracking device hidden among their equipment. As they crossed back to the Sovereign's will, none of them noticed the small addition to their gear. Admiral Kethavar was relieved to have his people back, but his questions about their defeat received uncomfortable answers. The humans had not tortured them or even been particularly cruel. They had simply been impossibly efficient at warfare. They think like soldiers, Thekvan reported, not like researchers or traders. Every move they made was calculated to cause maximum damage with minimum risk. They've been trained for this. Trained by whom? Kethavar demanded. They're primitives from an unknown world. Sir, with respect, they're not primitives. Their weapons are primitive, but their tactics are advanced. They've clearly fought wars before. Many wars. This information disturbed Admiral Kethavar greatly. The collective had conquered dozens of species, but most had been peaceful civilizations with little military experience. The idea of a species that specialized in warfare was troubling. He was still considering this when the tracking device activated. Kim's modification was simple but effective. Using collective technology, it sent out a broad-spectrum message across all communication frequencies. The message was short, transmitted in clear human language, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. Mayday, Mayday. Ghost Division under attack by unknown alien force. Children in immediate danger. Request immediate assistance. Send everything. The message broadcast continuously, growing stronger as the Sovereign's will's own communication array boosted its signal. Within minutes, it had reached the edge of human space. Admiral Kethvar only realized what had happened when his communication officer reported unusual activity on all frequencies. Sir, we're detecting a massive increase in communication traffic from the direction of what must be human space. Multiple sources, all using the same unknown language. What are they saying? Translation computers are working, sir, but the message traffic appears to be military in nature. Coordinates, fleet movements, tactical discussions. A cold feeling settled in Admiral Kethvar's stomach. How much message traffic? Sir, our computers are having trouble keeping up. There appear to be hundreds of different sources, possibly thousands. That was when the first human ships arrived. They didn't come through hyperspace like civilized species. They came through something else, something that tore holes in reality itself and allowed massive ships to appear without warning. The first vessel to emerge was huge, nearly as large as a collective dreadnought. But where collective ships were, smooth and elegant, this human ship was angular and brutal, covered in weapon systems and armor plating. Unknown alien vessel, came a transmission in perfect collective language. This is Captain Rachel Torres of the Terran Defense Force ship Retribution. You have attacked one of our vessels. Explain yourselves immediately. Admiral Kethvar was stunned. Not only had more humans arrived, but they had somehow learned his language and were communicating clearly. How was that possible? I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Collective, he replied. We were investigating a distress signal. Admiral, Captain Torres interrupted, our people did not send a distress signal. Our records show you attacked a vessel conducting classified operations. That constitutes an act of war. Before Kethvar could respond, more tiers appeared in space. More human ships emerged, each one as large and heavily armed as the first. Within minutes, 12 human vessels surrounded the Sovereign's will. This is impossible, Dr. Sylvan whispered. How did they arrive so quickly? How did they even know where to find us? Captain Zoreth was studying the sensor readings with growing alarm. Sir, these ships are not primitive. Their technology appears to be roughly equivalent to ours, just different. And their weapons? What about their weapons? Sir, they're all pointed at us. Admiral Kethvar opened communications with the human fleet. Captain Torres, surely we can discuss this situation like civilized beings. This was clearly a misunderstanding. The human captain's response was immediate and chilling. Admiral, you picked the wrong species kids to mess with. More human ships were arriving every minute. The tiers in space seemed to be getting larger, allowing bigger vessels to come through. Kethvar watched in growing horror as his sensors detected battleships, carriers, and ship types he couldn't even identify. Sir, his communication officer reported, Fleet Command is asking about our status. The reinforcements are still 4 hours away. Admiral Kethvar looked at the growing human fleet surrounding his ship. There were now over 30 vessels, with more arriving constantly. Some of them were larger than anything in the collective fleet. Cancel the reinforcement request, he said quietly. Sir, cancel it. Tell Fleet Command we have the situation under control. Captain Zoreth stared at him. Sir, we don't have the situation under control. I know that. But if we call for help, Fleet Command will send ships. And if they send ships, the humans will destroy them. Kethvar studied the tactical display. Look at this fleet, Captain. They didn't just happen to have these ships nearby. They built this response specifically for us. The truth was becoming clear. The small human vessel had been bait. The distress signal had been intended to lure the collective into making exactly the mistake they had made. Sir, the communication officer said urgently, we're receiving a transmission from the original human vessel. Put it through. Sergeant. Chen's voice came through clearly. Admiral Kethvar, this is your last chance for a peaceful resolution. You have 1 minute to surrender your vessel and prepare to be boarded. And if I refuse? Then you'll discover why humans don't have many friends in the galaxy, sir. We tend to solve problems permanently. Admiral Kethvar looked around his bridge. His officers were staring at him, waiting for orders. Outside, the human fleet continued to grow. Some of the new arrivals were so large they barely fit on his sensors. Sergeant Chen, he said finally, what are your terms? Complete surrender of your vessel and crew. You'll be questioned about collective military capabilities and territories. Any resistance will be met with immediate and overwhelming force. And, if we comply, you'll be treated according to the laws of war. Your crew will not be harmed if they cooperate. Admiral Kethvar closed his eyes. In 300 years, the collective had never surrendered to anyone. They had always been the ones making demands, taking prisoners, conducting research on helpless species, but they had never encountered humans before. All stations, stand down, he ordered. Prepare for boarding. Captain Torres's voice came through the communicators one final time. Smart choice, Admiral. But you should know something. This isn't even our main fleet. These are just the ships that happen to be close enough to respond quickly. Admiral Kethvar felt his scales turn cold. What do you mean? The real fleet is still coming, sir, and they're going to want to have a very long conversation with your superiors about what happens to species that threaten Earth's children. Escalation protocol. The collective high command chamber buzzed with nervous energy as reports flooded in from across their territory. Supreme Admiral Veltar read the communications with growing disbelief, his 4 hands trembling slightly as he processed the information. Repeat that last transmission, he ordered. Communication Officer Rindal cleared his throat nervously. Sir, Admiral Kethvar reports that his flagship has been captured by an unknown species calling themselves humans. The entire crew is being held prisoner. The unknown species is demanding immediate negotiations with our high command. 1. Ship? Supreme Admiral Veltar's voice rose in disbelief. Admiral Kethvar's flagship was defeated by 1 ship? No, sir. By 1 small ship that called for help. According to our last communication, over 200 human vessels have gathered at the incident site. And, sir, they're heading toward our space. Supreme Admiral Veltar stood slowly from his command throne. In his 400 years of life, he had overseen the conquest of 17 species and the annexation of 43 star systems. The collective was the most powerful military force in this sector of the galaxy. The idea that they were being threatened by a previously unknown species was absurd. What do we know about these humans? He demanded. Science Director Pilsek consulted his data tablet. Very little, sir. They appear to be a carbon-based species from a world they call Earth. Their technology is roughly equivalent to ours, but their ship designs are unusual. They seem to prefer heavy armor and kinetic weapons over energy shields and plasma systems. Kinetic weapons? Veltar scoffed. Primitive throwing rocks at starships? Sir, according to Admiral Kethvar's reports, their kinetic weapons proved highly effective against our energy shields. Our boarding parties were defeated with heavy casualties. This gave Veltar pause. Collective military technology was the finest in the galaxy. If primitive weapons had proven effective against it, these humans must have some tactical advantage he didn't understand. What about their fleet movements? Where are they going? Sir, that's what concerns us most. Our deep space sensors are tracking a massive human fleet moving directly toward our home systems. Current estimates suggest over 1,000 vessels, of various sizes. The chamber fell silent. 1,000 ships was larger than the entire collective home fleet. That's impossible, Veltar said finally. No species maintains a fleet that large. The resource requirements alone. Sir, interrupted Intelligence Director Nexavar, we've been analyzing the human communications we've intercepted. Our computers... have learned enough of their language to provide basic translations. And, sir, these are not their main military forces. According to their transmissions, these are what they call rapid response fleets and planetary defense units. They seem to maintain much larger forces that haven't been deployed yet. Supreme Admiral Veltar felt a chill run down his spine. The collective had built their empire by finding species weaker than themselves and absorbing them. The idea of encountering a species that might be stronger was terrifying. What are they? Demanding complete withdrawal from the incident site, release of all prisoners taken from their vessel, and immediate negotiations regarding what they call war crimes committed against non-combatant personnel. War crimes? We were conducting standard capture operations for research purposes. Intelligence Director Nexvar consulted his notes again. Sir, this seems to be a translation error. The humans appear to believe that Admiral Kethvar attacked children. Children? The specimens were research subjects. Yes, sir, but the humans don't seem to make that distinction. According to our translations, they consider any attack on their young to be grounds for what they call total war. Veltar was beginning to understand the scope of the problem. Most civilized species understood that research was necessary for scientific advancement. Apparently, humans did not. Sir, Communication Officer Rindal interrupted. We're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. They're requesting immediate communication with our highest military authority. Put it through. The view screen activated, showing a human female in what appeared to be military uniform. She was older than the young ones Admiral Kethvar had, reported, with gray hair and hard eyes. When she spoke, her voice was calm, but carried an undertone of barely controlled fury. I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. I am authorized to speak for Earth's government and military. You have attacked one of our vessels and taken prisoners from our personnel. This constitutes an act of war. Supreme Admiral Veltar drew himself up to his full height. I am Supreme Admiral Veltar of the Zephyrian Collective. There has been a misunderstanding. Our forces were responding to a distress call. Admiral, Chen interrupted. We have reviewed all communications between your forces and ours. Admiral Kethvar was informed that no distress call had been sent. He chose to attack anyway. The vessel contained research specimens. The vessel contained members of my daughter's unit. Admiral Chen's voice turned deadly quiet. Admiral, you attacked children under the protection of Earth's military. That changes everything. Veltar felt confusion mixing with his growing fear. Your daughter? Staff Sergeant Maya Chen, Ghost Division. The young woman your admiral tried to capture for his research programs. Admiral Chen leaned forward on her screen. Admiral, you need to understand something about humans. We take the safety of our children very seriously. Surely we can negotiate some arrangement. Negotiation time is over, Chen said flatly. Here are your options. Option 1, immediate and complete surrender of all collective military forces, followed by war crimes, trials, and reparations. Option 2, total war. Supreme Admiral Veltar had never heard such terms from a conquered species. They were supposed to be the ones making demands, not receiving ultimatums. You cannot seriously expect the collective to surrender to an unknown species, he said. Admiral, you're thinking like someone who's never fought a real war, Chen replied. You're used to bullying peaceful research species, but humans aren't peaceful, and we're not researchers. We're what other species become when they're forced to fight for survival for millions of years. Our fleet contains over 200 ships of the line. Our advanced fleet contains over 1,000 ships, Admiral. Our main battle fleet contains over 5,000, and that's just what we can deploy quickly. Chen's expression never changed. But numbers aren't really the issue here. What do you mean? You attacked our children, Admiral. When humans are protecting their young, we don't count the cost. We don't consider acceptable losses. We don't negotiate or compromise. Admiral Chen's voice grew colder. "We simply removed the threat permanently." On his tactical displays, Supreme Admiral Veltar could see the human fleet approaching collective space. It was enormous, far larger than anything they could deploy to stop it. "Sir," Science Director Pilsek whispered, "our analysis suggests their technological capabilities are roughly equal to ours, but their ship construction suggests they've been building for war for a very long time." "What do you mean?" "Sir, their vessels are designed for sustained combat operations. Heavy armor, redundant systems, extensive point defense networks. These are not ships built for exploration or research. They're ships built to fight and win wars." Supreme Admiral Veltar was beginning to understand the terrible mistake Admiral Kethvar had made. The collective had encountered a military species, not a research species, and they had attacked that species' children. "Admiral Chen," he said carefully, "what would it take to resolve this peacefully?" "Nothing," she replied immediately. "Admiral, you crossed a line that humans don't allow anyone to cross. The only question now is how much of your civilization survives the consequences. Surely you don't mean to destroy an entire civilization over a misunderstanding." Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft but absolutely final. "Admiral, 3 hours ago your forces tried to capture my daughter for use in research experiments. They tried to take her apart to see how she works." Chen's eyes were like ice. "So yes, Admiral, I absolutely mean to destroy your entire civilization, if that's what it takes to make sure this never happens again." The transmission ended, leaving the collective high command in stunned silence. "Sir," Communication Officer Rindal said quietly, "what are your orders?" Supreme Admiral Veltar looked around the chamber at his officers. They were all staring at him, waiting for the solution he had always provided before. But this time was different. This time, they had awakened something that was bigger, stronger, and angrier than they were. "Contact all fleet commanders," he said finally. "Begin immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel from border systems. Prepare our main fleet for defensive operations." "Sir, are we surrendering?" "No," Veltar said quietly. "We're preparing for a war we can't win, because the alternative is admitting that the collective's 300-year expansion is over." But in his heart, he knew the truth. The moment Admiral Kethvar had attacked those human children, the collective's days as a galactic power had ended. Now all that remained was finding out how many of them would survive humanity's response. Children of Earth. The collective home system of Zephyr Prime had never seen so many ships in one place. Supreme Admiral Veltar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the massive dreadnought Eternal Dominion, watching as his entire fleet assembled, for what everyone knew would be their final battle. 247 ships of the line. The entire military might of the Zephyrian collective gathered from across their territory. It was the largest fleet in their 300-year history. It was not going to be enough. "Sir," reported Fleet Captain Dorman, "long-range sensors are detecting the human fleet. They'll be here in 6 hours." "How many ships?" "Sir, our computers are having difficulty with an accurate count. At least 1,500 vessels, possibly more. Some of them are larger than anything in our database." Veltar closed his eyes. In the 3 days since Admiral Chen's ultimatum, they had tried everything. Diplomatic contacts with neighboring species had been ignored. Apparently, word of the collective's research programs had spread, and no one was willing to help them. Attempts to negotiate had been rejected without discussion. Even offers of complete surrender had been refused. The humans wanted more than surrender. They wanted examples. "Sir," Communication Officer Rindal interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet." "Put it through." Admiral Sarah Chen appeared on the view screen again, but this time she was not alone. Behind her stood dozens of other humans in military uniforms, all wearing expressions of cold determination. "Supreme Admiral Veltar," she said formally, This is your final opportunity to surrender unconditionally. Admiral Chen, our fleet stands ready to defend our home system. Surely we can reach some arrangement. Admiral, let me be very clear about something, Chen interrupted. This is not a negotiation. This is me giving you one last chance to save some of your people's lives. We cannot simply surrender our entire civilization. You should have thought of that before you tried to kidnap children for scientific experiments. Admiral Chen's voice was like ice. Admiral, you are about to learn what happens when a species threatens Earth's young. The transmission ended, leaving the collective fleet alone with their fear. 6 hours later, the human fleet arrived. They didn't come through hyperspace. Like civilized species, they came through the same reality-tearing portals they had used before, but this time, the portals were enormous. Ships the size of small moons emerged from holes in space that shouldn't have been possible. Supreme Admiral Veltar watched in horror as the human fleet deployed. Over 2,000 ships of various sizes, from small fighters to massive battleships that dwarfed anything the collective had ever built. But it wasn't just the numbers that terrified him, it was the formation. The human fleet wasn't arranged for conquest or occupation, it was arranged for extermination. Every ship was positioned for maximum firepower overlap. Every weapon was pointed toward the collective fleet and the planets behind them. Sir, Fleet Captain Dorman said quietly, they're not here to capture territory. They're here to destroy everything. Before Veltar could respond, the human fleet opened fire, but they didn't target the collective ships first. They targeted the orbital defense platforms around Zephyr Prime. In less than 30 seconds, defensive installations that had taken decades to build were reduced to glowing debris. The message was clear. The collective's homeworld was now defenseless. Return. Fire! Veltar ordered desperately. The collective fleet unleashed everything they had. Plasma cannons, energy torpedoes, particle beams, the combined firepower of their entire military struck the human fleet. The humans barely slowed down. Their ships were armored like nothing the collective had ever seen. Weapons that should have destroyed them completely seemed to barely scratch their hulls. And their own weapons. The human weapons were terrifying in their effectiveness. Instead of elegant energy beams, they used massive kinetic projectiles, fired at incredible speeds. Instead of sophisticated plasma systems, they used simple nuclear warheads that exploded with devastating force. But most frightening of all, they used tactics that the collective couldn't understand or counter. Human ships would appear from nowhere, fire everything they had, then disappear before the collective could respond. Small human vessels would dart between the massive collective, dreadnoughts targeting specific systems with surgical precision. Larger human ships would simply ram through collective formations, their armor absorbing damage that should have destroyed them. Within the first hour, half the collective fleet was destroyed. Sir, Dorman reported, we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Chen. Put it through. Admiral Chen appeared on screen again, but now she was standing on what was clearly a ship's bridge during active combat. Behind her, Veltar could see human officers working calmly at their stations while explosions lit up the viewports. Supreme Admiral Veltar, she said, I'm giving you one final chance. Surrender now, and we'll spare your civilian population. Admiral, you're committing genocide. No, Admiral, I'm making sure this never happens again. Chen's expression was completely calm. You see, humans have a simple rule when it comes to protecting our children. If you threaten them, we remove you. Permanently. You can't destroy an entire civilization over one incident. Admiral, this wasn't one incident. We've been monitoring your transmissions for the past 3 days. We know about your research programs. We know about the 17 species you've conquered. We know about the thousands of beings you've taken for experimentation. Veltar felt his heart sink. They had studied the humans for 3 days, but apparently the humans had been studying them too. You're not just a threat to our children, Chen continued. You're a threat to everyone's children. That makes this very simple for us. What do you want? Complete dismantling of your military capability. Complete release of all research subjects. Complete withdrawal from all conquered territories. And complete assurance that this will never happen again. And if we refuse? Admiral Chen's smile was terrifying in its coldness. Then we'll demonstrate why Earth is called a death world, Admiral. We'll show you what happens when you take the wrong species children. As if to emphasize her point, another wave of human ships emerged from space-time portals. These were even larger than the first wave, and they immediately began targeting the collective's remaining ships with weapons that defied understanding. "Sir," Dormin whispered, "our fleet is down to 30% effectiveness. We can't win." This. Supreme Admiral Veltar looked around his bridge. His officers were staring at him with expressions of desperation and fear. Outside, their mighty fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that fought like nothing they had ever encountered. "All ships," he said into his communicator, "cease fire. All ships, stand down." The relief on his bridge was immediate, but Admiral Chen's expression didn't change. "Admiral, I need more than a ceasefire," she said. "I need complete surrender." "You have it," Veltar said quietly. "The Zephyrian Collective surrenders unconditionally." "Good. Prepare to be boarded. Your people will be questioned about your research programs and military capabilities. Any resistance will result in the immediate destruction of your remaining ships." The transmission ended, leaving Veltar alone with the ruins of his civilization. As human boarding parties prepared to take control of every collective ship, Admiral Chen opened a private communication channel to her daughter. "Maya, are you and your team all right?" Staff Sergeant Maya Chen appeared on the screen, grinning despite her exhaustion. "We're fine, Mom. A little banged up, but nothing serious." "Good. Your father would never forgive me if I let something happen to you on my watch." "Mom, was all this really necessary? It was just one ship." Admiral Chen's expression grew serious. "Maya, you're 22 years old. You're barely old enough to vote, let alone serve in a combat unit. But you and your team are out here, thousands of light years from home, putting your lives on the line for humanity. It's our job, Mom." "Yes, it is, and it's my job to make sure that anyone who threatens you understands the consequences." Admiral Chen looked out at the wreckage of the collective fleet. "The galaxy is full of species that think they can take whatever they want from whoever they want. Today, they learned that Earth's children are not available for taking." 3 months later, the former territories of the Zephyrian Collective had been completely reorganized. The 17 conquered species had been freed, and their planets returned. The thousands of research subjects had been released and provided with medical care. The Collective's military had been disbanded, their weapons destroyed, and their leaders put on trial for crimes against sentient beings. And throughout the galaxy, a message had been sent that every species understood perfectly. Earth's children were under the protection of a civilization that would burn down the stars before allowing harm to come to them. Maya Chen, now promoted to lieutenant and assigned to training new recruits, often thought about that message as she watched the next generation of Earth's defenders prepare for their missions. The galaxy was a dangerous place, full of threats and unknowns. But Earth's children would be ready for whatever came next, because that's what humans did. They protected their young, no matter what the cost.